Awesome, awesome. Hey, Charlotte.
Hi,
How you
Malaika.
doing?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
It's a Sunday, just taking things slow, excited to be here for this conversation. And all in all, just grateful, having gratitude in my heart.
Mm, I love
So,
that.
so this conversation is a final assignment for our gender and sexuality equity and opportunity class at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And so my lovely classmate, colleague, friend, and I are really excited to have this conversation. So we can start by sharing a little bit about ourselves. So, like our names, where we call home, um, the program that we're doing at HGSE, and our educator why. Um, and then we'll hop into the conversation. So I'll let you kick us off.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Charlotte Conway, and I am in the Educational Leadership, Organizations, and Entrepreneurship program at Hugsy. Yay! We both are. It's a great program. And so I just moved from Denver, Colorado, and I spent my whole life, basically my entire life in Colorado. Um, and so I'm coming from this educator background working in museums, so in museum education, which is a really special place because it's serving all these different arms of local communities. So in Denver, we're serving families, we're serving school districts from across the state, which really just represents a huge diversity of people and stories. um, and so really my why for joining Hugsy or Harvard is to figure out how to actually serve communities. So how to not just tell them what we think they want, but to figure out how to ask and have conversations with community and co-create programs using this like wealth of resources that museums in particular have. And so just using it not to dictate what people should learn, but to ask and share in learning. So that's my why. What about you?
Um, that's so beautiful. I love the like learner first approach,
Mm.
which I feel like excited to learn more about this year. So, my name is Malaika Ogukwe. I am, like Charlotte mentioned, I'm in the Education Leadership, Organizations, and Entrepreneurship program. Massachusetts is where I grew up, but I call a bunch of places home: Kenya, Nigeria, and Massachusetts. So lots of different kind of experiences that drawing from there. My educator, why? I think we could do a whole other like in-depth conversation on that, but at a high level, kind of from my own personal experiences, I'm really interested in social emotional well-being for adults and kids, and specifically around how we can use somatics and movement practices and body work to help facilitate that development. So I am here at Hugsy looking to develop programs and curriculum around SEL for, our just overall well-being. So excited to be here, excited for what this next year holds, and yeah, we can hop into our conversation.
Yeah, what a great segue because exactly your interests are so relevant to this class and the content that we covered in this class.
Where should we start? Where should we start? Because I think so. Our class is gender and sexuality, and just understanding what equity and opportunity looks like in context. And we've had some really great conversations over the last couple of weeks about how we're understanding our own gender and sexuality development and how it plays into our work. So, how did like kind of how did we even get here? Like, what in the world happened to create these structures and institutions that require us to now reflect on how we understand our gender and sexuality? What's your take on that?
So I think, and this has been reinforced through the course learning, but I mean, we've got this long history of colonialism and capitalism and patriarchy kind of like building this structure. And then now in the modern era, it's been sort of in this era of globalization, it's become a norm that many cultures are operating on an assumption of, valuing masculinity and whiteness and male qualities above all else. And I think that in our conversations, we've talked about the harmful effects of this on so many communities, people as individuals, and like all of this internal distress. And then also our planet, like literally like the, you know, extractive capitalist mentality is taking for profit. It's, buy low, sell high. This is based on getting something from someone else, so that there's always people that don't have, and then there's always some people that have and
Mhm.
that are takers.
Always.
Yeah.
This makes me think of the decolonizing gender zine
Yes.
and how it talked about, colonialists will come into these new places and they'll see different gender expressions. And because they didn't understand it, they like put measures into place to force these indigenous populations into the binary.
Mhm.
And use we can I think we can still see how the colonists coming in and I said colonists, colonialists coming in and like dictating, like, okay, men, if you are born male, you should behave and act in a certain way, and if you were assigned female at birth, like this is how you should express yourself, and this is what a proper woman is. And so many of those ideas have like trickled down and like are enforced in our cultural traditions, in our school policies, in so many different ways. So like in my identity as a Nigerian American, I see the ways that women are supposed to be in the house, be in partnership, be in what kind of work women are supposed to be in. Period. And so seeing how kind of that colonialist, capitalist agenda has trickled down into the way we understand our identities today is kind of crazy.
It's kinda crazy. It's another text I'm gonna reference right now is the, Five Faces of Oppression, because
Mhm,
I think what you and I are talking about right now is also about intersecting oppressions.
mhm,
Like, we're not looking at I mean, we are talking about misogyny and sexism and, racism, but there's so many isms, and they actually from what I got from the text Five Faces of Oppression,
mhm,
these oppressions show up in similar ways to take power from oppressed people.
mhm.
I think specifically they talk about exploitation, so that extraction we talked about,
Right.
marginalization, powerlessness, imperialism, and then violence. And this is all and I guess I wanted to bring it back to, like, how this shows up in our bodies as well,
Mhm,
because, first of all, your work with somatic social emotional learning is going to be, like, next steps to helping people heal,
mhm,
um, and also, again, referencing the decolonizing gender zine, Malaika and I in a small group did a amazing activity from this zine. It was so good. It was so good. Wait, do you want to talk about that and, somatic healing?
this exercise that we did, we like reimagined like I think what was the name of the activity? Like re-envisioning our bodies or something like that.
Ah,
Um, I should have the name of that, but it was a really powerful experience, like powerful activity. I think as like and kind of bringing it to like you and I, like as women, we have all of these experiences that like we end up like internalizing within our bodies. If you are like inclined to psychology and mental health work, you might have heard of the book The Body Keeps Score. And in all of our like interactions, especially as it relates to our identity as women, we hear these messages about what women should and shouldn't do, and like how we're supposed to be, and what it means to be a woman, and how to be a proper woman, and all of this, like all of these things. And it just puts us in a box that like doesn't allow us to express ourselves fully and authentically. So this activity that we did, we re-envisioned our bodies, and we created depictions of like who we would be if we had full agency and autonomy to dictate who we are and how we express ourselves. And it was such a beautiful exercise. Like I remember your drawing was, you made it, you like tried to make it like almost gender neutral, so that you wouldn't be, almost like not define yourself by your gender. Even like I might be going left on how I like interpreted that, but I think you did a really excellent job in like depicting how you would feel and like how you would be, and not limiting yourself to like this strict definition that the colonialists and imperialists have put upon us.
Mhm.
What it means to be a woman.
Absolutely, and I loved your drawing too, and Malika's was so great too because it wasn't like a human figure. It was like this beautiful drawing of like, if I remember correctly, like a star with these like this beautiful ray of light, and then there was clear boundaries between your light and other people's lights. But then here are the other stars, the other people that exist in community with
Mhm.
us and around us. And it was, to me, that was like a beautiful depiction of like collectiveness, but then like boundaries and protection. And like, I actually, as a woman, I think boundaries are so important because often we're asked to do this emotional lifting, this emotional labor for other people in our lives. And that is additional labor we are not paid for. We are not, it takes its toll on our bodies over time, and it, remains with us through generations. So like I was just like, your drawing was beautiful and that practice was so great. And I think it goes into like our thinking of, how do we begin to heal and like, you know, deepen these cracks, these fissures in this system that is already, you know, not stable, like it's not working. So how do we, what's next for us, you know?
Oh, I think about, one of the texts that really stood out to me was the cycle of socialization. I
Oh,
think being able to see like how these different messages are presented to us, the ways that they, these ideas of who we are and how we should be come to us, and the inner turmoil of like, okay, do I conform? Do I not? And like observing what happens when you don't conform, and you're kind of going through that process of, okay, like for my own protection, so that I can remain in the dominant group, so I can remain, so I can keep a sense of belonging. And then we perpetuate that same thing because, well, we don't want to be outcast. So thinking about the cycles of socialization, kind of reflecting on my work as an educator, how can I intervene in that cycle of socialization, right? Like there's the things that where I'm like looking at the chart right now, there's the first socialization, which happens kind of like in your most immediate,
yeah.
um, like your family, your school community, like most immediate people. Then, or I guess school would be institution. So that'll be the second kind of socialization. And that's where we can come in, like as educators, when we, take in the context with which we're serving in, and see like what are the predominant narratives and stories that are being provided to children, and how is that going to impact their self-image and their understanding of self. How can we affirm to young boys it is okay to cry, it is okay to for young girls to be assertive, and her no can mean no.
Mhm.
How can we support children's understanding of their own agency in their own understandings of self, and that it is okay to be different, to queer their, like, let me not say that because I might be using the queer as a verb in the wrong way, but like how can they have agency over themselves, and if we can come in and intervene and break up some of those like messaging that they're receiving from early on, then maybe when they grow up, they're not having to do a lot of unlearning that I feel like a lot of us are doing now.
Yeah, we're deep in it right now, I would say. Um, I think that's so important too. And I'm thinking about my context as well. And I was doing puberty education for fifth graders and through the museum I just worked at. And, these are 10-year-olds more or less. So they're kids. They're all kids. And I always had this question, like, how do I not ostracize the queer and the trans and the non-binary students in the classroom, um, and like really let them embody their full however they feel about their identity, their gender identity, their sexual orientation.
Mhm,
And I think that this class actually really gave me some ideas. There was one text on the genderspectrum.org, and it was all about queer, trans inclusive sexual education.
mhm,
And really what it's just reinforcing these what we've been hearing over and over again, which is just like these binaries aren't serving anyone. They're not serving boys or girls in the classroom any more than they're serving queer children. Like, everybody can express themselves in the way that's healthy for them, and it's less damaging for everyone if we are accepting of difference and celebrate difference.
mhm.
Um, and I think that that can look like, well, I'm still working on what that can look like, but there's a lot we can do by just like telling students again and again, like, your identity is unique. You're not in these boxes, and only you know who you are.
Mhm, mhm.
know,
I
and who you
like
be.
to kind of create kind of like another line through kind of like these binaries are not serving us.
Mhm.
Um, Immediately, the thing that came up to mind was like as adults who are navigating, person like interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, familiar relationships, like all of these, when we force ourselves into binaries, we put boxes around our ways of being, and our ways of connecting and our ways of engaging. And there's an article that we read called Sex Education That Goes Beyond Sex. And I absolutely loved that reading because it was talking about like how can we infuse ethics into sex education, like what does it mean to be accountable to the people that we're in community with, what does it mean to have care for people that we are in connection to. And when we, for like in my context, I'm thinking about Nigerians, Nigerian Americans, Nigerians across the diaspora. The woman takes care of the house, the man makes the money, they y'all have kids, and that you live happily ever after. And maybe that worked at one point in time. Like I think that's something that this class has also helped me like come to accept is like at one point, like some of these traditions that are part of our cultures served a purpose at some point, and there's a reason that it has like the tradition has maintained. But it is also culture is also fluid and it changes over time as the people that are part of it know more and have greater perspective and broader perspective. And that article, sex education that goes beyond sex, incorporates how we interact with people, that recognizes their humanity. And I think when we are like pushing ourselves into these binaries of who we're supposed to be, we aren't actually like looking at the person and responding to the person that's before us, but rather like an image, a facade, a mirage, if you will, of who the person is supposed to be based on what society has been telling us since we were kids.
Mm, yep. Okay. That I just resonate with that so much. And like, because that's what we're doing when we're teaching kids. And I'm thinking of the pedagogy of the oppressed text, and it really, I mean, it's really saying, sorry if you can hear cars going by also, um, but really it was like traditional education is teaching children to conform. It's saying, this is what you have to be. You don't know, you're an empty vessel and I will fill you with all the information you need.
Mhm.
and that they're, passive, that students are passive and don't have their own like rich knowledge and wisdom from their own experience, their own identity, their own cultural and historical background. And I found that text really useful for like, how do we stop boxing people in?
Mhm.
And I thought it gave some really like practical advice on that, which is like communicate. I mean,
Who would have thought? So revolutionary.
no, it was like, see your students as people. Ask
Mhm.
them about themselves, think of them as your co-learners.
Mhm. Mhm.
They are teaching you about who they are, and you are teaching them about who you are. You're sharing in this learning, you're collaborating. And I'm trying to find exactly, but they talk about like, yes, this revolutionary educational practice, which is encouraging people to be full conscious beings that are constantly in this state of becoming,
Mhm.
entering consciousness and in relation with the world and community. And I love that because it totally ties to what you said about, you know, cultures are shifting, like the needs are shifting, and it's never going to stop. We're always becoming, and the world around us is always becoming, the people around us. And so we can, you know, expect them to be figuring it out as we are. And I don't know, I found this to be a really liberatory text. And again, it kind of just made me more sure that I want to do co or, participatory learning and like co-created learning experiences that are really like valuing people's inherent knowledge and wisdom,
Mhm.
letting that shine. Yeah.
I love what you kind of elevated around like co-learning and co-creating. Like none of us exist in a vacuum. And kind of like some like I think the pedagogy of the oppressed kind of talks to this of like children are not blank slates. I think you just said this. They're not blank slates. They are like they bring their own funds of knowledge, and something kind of that comes up to in my kind of what how I'm thinking about my work of kind of tying in somatics into social emotional learning, especially like those of us that are in diaspora. The content, like Nigerians love dancing. Like we have so many dances that like, especially as women, like we move our hips and there's something about dancing and shaking a little bum bum that like will just make my day so much better. Um, and there's a lot of research around kind of like the emotions that sit and get stuck in the pelvic region. And so, kind of thinking back on thinking to the way like my ancestors moved and their ways of being and just dancing and celebrating and how that like naturally moved emotions and stuck energies out. Well, when you're in a Western society, Western capitalist society that prioritizes productivity over all else, and you're sitting at a computer all day, how can we connect to that way of being that helped to move the emotions out? So, like when I look at SCL today, a lot of it is very, Western. It's very geared towards younger kids, and that's a helpful foundation. But I think when we're trying to think of how can we create more accessible and equitable opportunities for learners, we have to think about like the historical and cultural context, ancestral context that some of these students are coming from, and thinking about how colonialism and capitalism have interrupted those ways of being and how we're seeing that manifestation in our kids today. So I'm really excited to like co-learn and co-create with like different cultures and different groups, to bring some of those more active, physical, dance, celebratory practices and connection to creating like a more holistic approach to social emotional well-being.
Oh, beautiful. And like, I just love no, it's like I'm so inspired. And like, there's this organic, our bodies know. we need to dance and sing,
Mhm.
and that is radical in, like we were talking about a, profit-driven society or efficiency-driven society, that's radical, and
Mhm.
so is joy and expressing joy. And so, like, here we are, and I think at least from my perspective, both of us are looking at where's the joy, where's the celebration, and just, like, allowing people to move and express that joy, and I think that that's really our next steps for healing is, like, joy is radical,
Mhm.
personal personal relationships, our personal community, our relationship with ourself,
Come on.
that is, like, pushing against capitalism. We're like, "Nuh-uh, I'm not a cog, I am
I
a whole."
am.
I am. Yes. It's like me and the universe and me I'm such a hippie. It's like me and, all these people around us, and we're really, like it's radical of us to say these systems,
Mhm.
they're not working. We don't need to be cogs. We don't need to be adhering to these, like, Western, white, patriarchal, capitalist, colonial, ableist, I mean, all the isms, like, they're not serving they're not serving everyone, and I think we're moving toward something better.
We are. We absolutely are. Hearing you like just gave me chills. And we didn't even get to talk about like the connection to nature and kind of like a whole ecological aspect, like environment core component to this.
Mhm.
Um, because that is also so like huge for our healing. I'm like also of the camp that like the earth gives us everything that we need. Like there is an abundance, and we are made to believe that there is not enough for all of us to go around, and that there are some people who just have to like suffer through like the effects of the climate crisis and capitalism and all of these horrible things that are happening to us as a collective and serve a really small minority group. Being in nature, I think like because we live in all of these cities and we don't touch dirt, we forget that we are of nature, and that when nature is sick and ill, we are also sick and ill. Um, yeah, that's those are like something that came to mind, and would love to hear kind of like some of the things you're thinking about as it relates to liberation, liberatory practices, healing, and nature.
Such a good question. So, and thinking about my context because it's so close to home, but of course, this is a global, lens to look at. I'm going to call it ecofeminism. But like even in Denver and Colorado specifically, there are many people growing up in very urban centers of Denver, Colorado. And, no surprise, they are largely Hispanic and Black communities that live in some of the most polluted neighborhoods. And people have higher rates of asthma and like other heart diseases and chronic health issues from being in factory or like industrialized areas or in rural Colorado, it's more like fracking and oil production and cattle. And those communities that are most impacted are always communities of color that are in high poverty contexts. And these same communities are having health problems at a higher level. And one thing in Denver is like a lot of kids that are growing up in the urban center of Denver almost never get access to the mountains and this like culture, this wonderful, like amazing world, I don't know, like World Heritage something, the Rocky Mountains, which are an hour drive away from Denver. They're so close. And a lot of people don't have access. And so like there's this one nonprofit that I worked with a couple times in Denver, but all she did it was literally one woman, and all she did was connect, Hispanic communities, people that only spoke Spanish. She would take them on little buses, like these kids with their families, to go swimming in the mountains. That was her whole nonprofit. And it was like but, like, it just led to so much, like, these children she worked with, they started performing better in school. Like, after they started going to see nature and like, swim, and she taught them to swim. She was an Olympic swim instructor, so she was just like but I'm like, "These are those little kernels." I'm like, "It can be done, and it can be done with you and I." Like,
Mhm, mhm.
little steps, that's how we start the collective healing. I don't know.
Mm.
So
Okay, we're on our way. We're doing it.
on our way.
I guess to close,
Yeah.
I guess what's one thing that brings you joy?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I love it. Right now, I've gotta say it's just being so new to Boston, it's this Harvard community, and it's not Harvard, it's the people that I've met through Harvard that are so amazing, like, from all over the world and, like, have done a million different things in education, and it's, like, so inspiring and invigorating, and it's, like that's the type of thing that just makes me more and more energized to continue to do good work. And
Ah,
how about you? What brings you joy, Malaika?
I love that. Love that. Love that. What brings me joy? I think my body, like my body keeping me alive to do this work and keeping me going. I think there have been times, and I remember very, very well times where I've experienced a lot of pain in my body. And so to be in a space where I can understand the language of my body a little bit more, so I can tend to pain, can tend to sensations in different ways, just makes me very grateful that, I have this relationship with my body so that I can take care of it, love on it. It's the one body that I got in this lifetime. So, very grateful for all that my body does for me so that I can keep doing this work.
Aw, both of the things that bring us joy are have to do with the like, they're personal, but they're the work we wanna do. It just makes sense.
It, it really, really does. Amazing. This
Thank
has
you so
been
much.
such a great conversation, Charlotte. I'm so glad we decided to do this. This was eye opening. It was affirming. It's been all the yummy things. So I think we can wrap up here. And for those who see this episode and this conversation and are interested in the work that we're doing, we would love to connect. Like, absolutely, please, like, hit us up. Um,
Love
so I think we'll include our LinkedIn information in the caption or the show notes or wherever this ends up being shared. Connect with us. We would love to hear different stories and see ways that we can collaborate and bring some of these visions to life. And yeah, I think we're
absolutely.
here.
Thanks again, Malaika. What a fruitful conversation, and, yeah, we look forward to anywhere this might lead, and I'm happy that I've gotten to work with you. This has been so wonderful.
Same, 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 same.